Welcome back to the Den of Nerds. I'm Josh. We need to talk about Daredevil Born again. Look, I don't like to be hyperbolic, but this show is literally about to save Marvel. And this is because of what Marvel has done with this show. This is not a normal show. It's not even normal by Marvel standards. They put a lot into this thing. And I think the best way to explain it is to go over 5 different reasons why I honestly believe this show is about to save the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And through these reasons, you'll learn all the changes, everything that happened behind the scenes, why this show is not normal, but why you should be extra excited for Daredevil Born again. I think this one's going to be a lot of fun, man. You're going to learn some stuff too. First reason that Daredevil Born again is about to save the MCU is because of the creative overhaul. You see, Marvel makes a lot of changes to their movies and their shows as they create them. And sometimes they do reshoots even after they have created them. This has always been a part of their formula. Some of the best Marvel movies you've ever seen have gone through this process. But there have also been some bad Marvel projects that have gone through this process. And throughout Phase 4 and the beginning of Phase 5, there were a lot of misses, and a lot of fans are beginning to question whether or not that old Marvel formula of fixing things with reshoots and remaking things as you go will still work. And all signs point to Daredevil Born Again being a project that does now work, but that's also because this thing had an unprecedented creative overhaul. We have never seen Marvel Studios do anything quite like what they did for Daredevil Born Again. And this was well documented as it broke in the Hollywood trades, where sources told the Hollywood Reporter that Kevin Feige had looked at the show and considered it to be unreleasable in its current form. The writers and the directors for that show were all fired, and Marvel told the cast and crew to go home. They basically took over 4 months away, and they brought on Dario Scardipan as the new showrunner. Dario Scardipan was the showrunner of the Punisher Netflix show, and so he was familiar with the medium, he was familiar with a lot of the actors. Marvel then brought on Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, and they became the new directors for this Daredevil show. Benson and Moorhead, by the way, total studs, directors on a lot of episodes of Moon Knight, and they came into Loki season 2 and directed some of the best episodes of that. They're workhorses behind the scenes for Marvel Studios. I even heard rumors that they were potentially looked at for an MCU film. And together, Dario Scardipan, Justin Benson, and Aaron Moorhead really reworked this thing. It was recently just revealed that Dario Scardipan wrote 3 additional episodes of material, and he wrote a ton of new scenes to fit the old material for the first version of this show in with the new version of the show. Now, Dario also had a talented writer's room around him, but really, again, it was Benson, Moorhead, and Scardipan that really were the driving forces behind this creative reboot. Out of all the material that was shot before, it seems like only 1 episode remains. In that original article that broke explaining the creative overhaul, they had reported that in the original version of the Daredevil show, he wasn't even going to put on the suit until episode 4 or 5. And when speaking about the original version of the MCU Daredevil show, Scardipan described it at worst being 2 people in a room talking about what being a superhero is all about. So based on the comments, based on a lot of things being said, this creative overhaul took the show way more in a line with the old tone of the Netflix show. They brought back characters from the Netflix show, including Foggy and Karen and Bullseye and even the actress that played Vanessa. And at a time when fans are really questioning Marvel's ability to deliver what fans actually want, especially within the context of this Marvel formula where reshoots and a lot of changes often occur, I think Daredevil Born Again is really not only going to save the Marvel brand, but it will also reestablish faith in the Marvel system itself. And it's probably the most Marvel-y thing they've ever done. They shot basically 6 to 9 episodes of the show, looked at it and said, nah, fam, we need to completely remake this. And that's a lot of commitment, and it appears to have worked. But now let's talk about reason number 2 as to why Born Again is about to save the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that's all because Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio helped cause the show to change. And they are both incredibly invested in the success of this show and in the success of their characters within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. During numerous interviews over the past few months, both Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio have been very vocal about their dislike for the original version of the show. It's always respectful and it's always in good taste, but they are pretty comfortable admitting that the changes that were made during that massive creative overhaul are really good, and they're big fans of what is now in the show. As an example, in a new article with GQ, Vincent D'Onofrio noted, "We made it known that we were not happy, and the big bosses, especially Kevin Feige, listened to us." This is Vincent talking about his experience when he was first making the show, talking about how he wasn't happy, and then talking about how the bosses listened to him. The rabbit hole here goes deeper than a lot of articles would suggest. As an example, I remember even when the original version of this show was being shot, I heard rumors that Charlie Cox really wanted to bring back the stunt coordinator from the old Netflix show, but for whatever reason, Marvel Studios would not do that. They had their own stunt people, their own action people, their own people that shot the action, so they didn't want to get the old guy from the Netflix Daredevil show. However, after the overhaul, Marvel Studios rehired Philip J. Silveira, the original stunt coordinator from the Netflix show. He did the thing, man. He returned to oversee the stunts, and he also took on a role as the second unit director for the new series. So they really got the band back together, and I can't help but think bringing on the Punisher showrunner and also having both Vincent D'Onofrio and Charlie Cox be really invested in the success of the show, be wanting to select people like the original stunt and fight coordinator to come over to the show. This is so cool. These guys are really actually using their influence and their experience within Hollywood to literally make the show better. Charlie Cox and Vincent really, really care about these characters. Charlie's recently said he'd play the character until he was 60 years old, which is wild because Marvel Comics is actually currently publishing a story where Daredevil is 60 years old. Maybe Charlie Cox told Charles Soule to write that so he has job security, but it just shows how much Charlie loves the character. He seems so enthusiastic about this new version of the show. Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio have been incredible soldiers for Marvel Studios. They have tried to go with the vibes of the original MCU version. They let their voices be heard, and they were integral parts of turning this thing around, making it the Daredevil show it probably always should have been. And I'm just so excited that those guys have that role, that they have their hands on the proverbial wheel. It's a blessing, and it is absolutely another reason why Daredevil Born Again is going to save the MCU. But let's talk about reason number 3, and this all has to do with Daredevil Born Again being the darkest thing Marvel Studios has ever created. Showrunner Dario Scartapan has spoken at great lengths about how dark the new Born Again show is. Charlie Cox has also talked about this, saying that there are certain scenes he has trouble watching. And on and on and on, a lot of these comments have been made, and it's because the show's really freaking dark. And the consensus is that it's going to go even darker and be way more twisted than even the Netflix show was. And this all likely has to do with the character of Muse. Muse in Marvel Comics is totally insane. And he also makes art with human body parts. In the comics, Muse does some incredibly dark things, including making a painting using the blood of over 100 people. He blows up a whole courtroom just to take a judge and a police officer hostage to make crazy twisted art with their bodies. And he literally blinds one of Daredevil's allies just to spite him. Muse is kind of like the Joker. He's twisted, he's nihilistic. It's really, really dark. And it seems like the Muse in this show is going to be about as dark as he was in the comic books. In fact, I believe Muse will do things so twisted and dark that it will force Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock to actually work together. Imagine an enemy so messed up that Kingpin and Daredevil have to set aside their differences. I think that's what we're getting, and that's Muse. That's not the only thing that's dark about the show. I mean, we've seen in the trailers that a line was crossed, and that line being crossed stopped Matt from being Daredevil. And it seems like this has to do with Foggy or Karen or potentially both. And it seems like they're going to be either wounded or killed by Bullseye. And that in and of itself is going to be incredibly dark and super emotional for Matt. I'm going to be really freaking mad about it myself. You could see this tension in the trailers for Daredevil Born Again, where Matt is trying to not be Daredevil, but he keeps being drawn back in to being a violent vigilante. And it seems like there's a real darkness coming out of Matt, and you can't blame him. Think about all the wild stuff we just talked about. Seems like he's going to snap, and not just this dude's legs. That brings us to reason number 4 that Daredevil Born Again is going to save the MCU. Violence in action like the good old days. It appears bringing back Philip J. Silvera really paid off. Just based off what we've seen in the trailers, Daredevil Born Again seems to have incredible action, and it also seems violent as hell. From Matt full force kicking somebody's legs into oblivion, or him lassoing Muse into a punch, or some of the ridiculous fighting that we've seen between him and Bullseye from the leaked set videos. Holy, this thing seems to have old school action and the grit of the Netflix series, possibly even more dialed up. I mean, we've seen Kingpin fighting against some dude with a hatchet, for God's sake. This show's going nuts, man, and we haven't even seen the Punisher do any action other than slam that hatchet into the lockers beside Matt. And you absolutely know that Philip J. Silvera is about to go crazy with the Punisher. I mean, that was the show that he was the showrunner of back in the day on Netflix. And a lot of Marvel action from their movies over the past couple of years has felt too bombastic and unrealistic. Sometimes it's just actors floating in space, flinging magic at each other. Sometimes it's giant CGI bodies punching other CGI things. And a lot of the action has lost its cleanness. It's lost its realistic feeling that the Infinity Saga had. Like, even going back to Iron Man 1, the action there was a lot more grounded despite Iron Man literally flying through the air. He's fighting with planes and tanks and bad guys with guns. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of the big cosmic stuff and the magic when it works, but I am missing the creative ways that Marvel used to use superheroes to show us fun action even at a street level. And the thing is, I think this show has even more action than the original version of it that they were making before the creative overhaul. Dario Scarpapan has even talked about the pacing of the new version of the show and how he wanted a lot more action to kind of carry the show and the scenes together. And I think everybody that was involved in the creative overhaul knew that the audience was looking for more incredible action. I mean, they brought back Philip J. Silvera, as we've talked about earlier in this video. And I think they were committed to over-delivering on that promise, and you can kind of see it just in the trailer. And that takes us to the 5th and final reason that Daredevil Born Again is about to save the MCU, and that's because you're not gonna have to wait too long to get season 2. They are literally already shooting season 2, and instead of having to wait our usual 3 to 5 years to see how this story will move forward, Marvel seems to be committed to doing the second season in an incredibly timely manner. It looks like this show will release next year, probably at a similar time, and that's kind of perfect because if they do release it during that same time, it will connect perfectly to Avengers Doomsday. Doomsday comes out in May, and if they shoot the show and get it all edited and all the post-production done, and they can release it around the same time, early next year, they could have all the episodes out before Doomsday in May. And the thing is, we have heard rumors that Daredevil will have some kind of small role in Doomsday. Recently, the stunt double of friggin' Charlie Cox kind of got in trouble for talking about how he was getting into shape for the next Avengers film. I would expect he will be in the Avengers film at least a little bit. And there are still rumors that Charlie Cox might be in Spider-Man 4, which will happen directly after Avengers Doomsday. And so as crazy as it seems, we might be getting Daredevil Season 1, a year later, Daredevil Season 2, then some Daredevil in Avengers, and then some Daredevil in Spider-Man 4. That's like a lot of Daredevil and a big story being told through multiple projects. Oh my God, it feels like the MCU is back. And you can see how much friggin' Kevin Feige loves Charlie Cox. He's been putting this dude into everything. I mean, he was in Spider-Man No Way Home. He was in Echo. He was in She-Hulk. They know fans love Charlie Cox. We're about to get this freaking incredible show. Season 2, less than a year away, and then all this stuff with him in other big Marvel movies. This is maybe the best time ever to be a Daredevil fan, and from the perspective of just being a Marvel fan, I think this is wonderful news. It shows that Marvel is getting back to some of their old habits. They're doing actually connected material that seems to live in an occupied world. I think it's just one more reason this show's about to save the MCU. Come on, Charlie Cox. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Am I just huffing the copium, or is this thing really gonna save the MCU? Let me know. And as I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.